Hi, folks. If you've joined us, welcome to our
Hey, good afternoon and welcome to the Cradle-to-Career Strategic Planning Committee meeting. I'm Gavin Payne and I'm the chair of this committee. Today's meeting, as always, will be run in accordance with Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requirements. We plan to end no later than 2 p.m. I want to welcome the other members of this committee who are with me today. Thank you, members Cochran, Lee, and Van Natten, and designee Bjerke for member Irwin. For volunteering to be on this committee. Members Cochran, Lee, and Van Natten, and designee Bjerke are participating remotely, as indicated on the agenda. Before we begin, a small note to members, please ensure that your cameras remain on throughout the duration of the meeting. That's one of our compliance requirements from Bagley-Keene. So there are 4 items on the agenda today, and all companion materials are posted on the C2C website. For members of the public following along to today's meeting, a visual and website link of where to find the materials can be found on your slide and on your screen on the slide. I want to set the stage for today's committee meeting by providing some background information. Statute specifies that the board is responsible for the strategic direction and implementation of the data system, which, per our own governance manual, includes setting, revisiting, and amending the vision, mission, and strategic objectives for the C2C system, particularly related to opportunity and outcomes gaps and advancing common goals. Statute also specifies that the board shall provide oversight of the data system and operational direction to the managing entity, the office, to ensure the data system is serving its intended purposes, this obviously includes adopting a strategic plan. So today marks the inaugural official 2026 committee meeting. The committee itself last met in 2023, and the board approved the current strategic plan back then. With the current plan scheduled to end in 2026, the board has been engaged in strategic planning discussions informally since early 2025. And as board members will remember from our meetings from last year. I want to thank my fellow board members for their thoughtful participation and commitment throughout this process, and that includes all board members, including those on this committee. I also want to thank Ronnie Jones, the senior consultant with Leading Resources Incorporated, for helping lead the strategic planning process. During agenda item 2, Ronnie will provide additional context on the planning process and walk us through a draft strategic plan for our deliberations. I also want to thank our wonderful staff for their partnership, as well as the public and stakeholders for their feedback and engagement throughout this work of the last year and this year. We have a lot to cover today, and I look forward to a thoughtful and productive discussion. We anticipate concluding today's committee meeting at 2 p.m. at the latest. So following today's meeting at our February 25th board meeting, just 2 weeks from now, the board will receive an update from our deliberations today and have an opportunity to review and discuss the draft strategic plan we ourselves will be discussing today. This committee itself will reconvene in April to review and refine the draft strategic plan prior to the board's formal approval at its May board meeting. For members of the public following along to today's meeting, there will be 2 opportunities to provide public comment during agenda items 2 and 3. I highly encourage board members and interested members of the public to take notes during today's conversation. So to start us all off, I want to call this meeting to order at 12:06 p.m. and ask that Stephanie please call the roll.
Chair Payne,
Present.
Designee Bierke for Member Irwin,
Here.
Member Cochran,
Here.
Member Lee,
Here.
Member Van Natten.
Here.
We have 5 members present. We have a quorum.
Perfect. And thank you, Stephanie. Let's move on to agenda item 2, which is discussion, public comment, and possible action on the strategic planning process, goals, and objectives. And I want to now invite Ronnie Jones to begin her presentation. And take it away, Ronnie.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Payne. During this agenda item, we will walk through the strategic planning process, goals, and objectives for the committee. In particular, we'll be reviewing the 5 goals and associated objectives, and we'll be soliciting feedback from the committee on each of these goals and their related objectives. As you know, stakeholder engagement has guided the strategic planning process by informing how C2C can continue to be useful and provide what is needed to make C2C's data, tools, and resources more user-friendly and accessible. Specifically, C2C has been intentional on incorporating user-centered design into the strategic planning process to ensure that all stakeholder voices, including members of the public, are heard. This section provides insight into the background of the strategic planning process, including how stakeholder engagement has informed this process, the committee charter, and goals for the strategic planning process. This presentation is intended to review the processes associated with how the strategic plan has been drafted to date, what feedback the committee might have, and what next steps are after this session. Next slide. At the November 14th, 2025 Governing Board meeting, members received a high-level overview of the key big picture concepts that emerged from prior board deliberations. The board reaffirmed the following 3 big picture concepts. Number 1, securing the office's position as a neutral source of trusted and reliable information. Number 2, focusing on the prioritization of the most useful and necessary data. And 3, defining a broad understanding of the work of C2C and providing clarity on C2C's current and future operational utility. Next slide. Additional input was also gathered. Advisory board feedback has been gathered from the advisory board members during exit interviews and highlighted C2C's commitment to advancing equity, transparency, and collaboration. Next slide. C2C has also invited members of the public to provide feedback. C2C hosted a community conversation on January 20th where members of the public shared insights into the strategic planning process. The public shared that the office's commitment to transparency resonated with them, as did C2C's focus on providing valuable data insights for all Californians. Next slide. Public stakeholder input also received in the form of written public comments and public comments during board and advisory board meetings. Members of the public have shared their support for C2C's efforts and have championed C2C's position as a source of neutral, trusted information for the people of California. As discussed at the November governing board meeting, the C2C strategic plan will be an integrated strategic plan. An integrated strategic plan sets shared goals that draw on the expertise and experience of all staff to address complex and connected challenges. C2C's goals and objectives will reflect the needs of individuals, families, policymakers, and communities across its interconnected work. An integrated strategic plan also prioritizes meaningful stakeholder engagement, helping people to see themselves in the data and understand what shapes student success. During this process, we will not be editing or revising C2C's mission, vision, or values, but we thought that it would be instructive to take a moment and review those during this meeting as we get into the feedback portion. C2C's strategic planning process has always been anchored in its mission and vision. And so here on the screen, you see the mission, which I'm going to read out loud just for clarity. The mission is to be California's source of actionable data and research on education, economic, and health outcomes for individuals, families, and communities to expand access to tools and services to navigate the education to employment pipeline. Next. The vision of C2C is that C2C will connect individuals and organizations with trusted information and resources, providing insights into critical milestones in the pipeline from early care to K-12 to higher education, skills training, and employment. The data system empowers individuals to reach their full potential and fosters evidence-based decision-making to help California build a more equitable future. In addition to being guided by C2C's mission and vision, the strategic planning process is informed by C2C values, which you'll see highlighted once we start to review each of the proposed goals and objectives. The C2C values include advancing equity. Equity is the North Star of C2C. At critical milestones, opportunities, and planning steps, C2C staff ask, how can we design and focus our work in to advance equity in small and big ways? They also focus on transparency because transparency enables C2C to build trust with the public and with each other. Additionally, accountability is important. When C2C experiences success, they collectively acknowledge the result of the work. When we experience setbacks, they collectively solve problems. Obviously, collaboration is another important value. Multiple perspectives from each other and the public transform good individual ideas into innovative and creative accomplishments. And finally, C2C staff are curious. When their work gets tough, they get curious. C2C leadership and staff have been working since early December to draft proposed practical strategic plan language that avoids overly abstract and consultant-driven terminology, right? So my goal is to not make this a college-level dissertation, but to really make this so that anyone who picks this the strategic plan up can be involved and feel as though they are incorporated in the plan. Staff are best suited to draft the strategic plan and language that does three things. One, it reflects what is feasible and not just aspirational. So these are goals that need to be accomplished across the next few years. It incorporates lessons from previous implementation, funding cycles, and statutory requirements. It also helps avoid goals that sound compelling but are difficult to execute. The strategic plan includes the following elements during this development phase. So each goal has a short introduction describing the purpose, or sorry, there's a short introduction that describes overall the purpose of the strategic plan. The 5 goals are grounded in the mission, vision, and values, which are stated. And then there are 3 to 6 objectives that are specific and measurable, that provide specific and measurable results to indicate progress. Also included in this draft of the strategic plan was a preamble that describes the context and intention of the goal. a value statement that describes why the goal matters and why it's important. And then finally, we've included a values to goal alignment table that provides a simple, clear roadmap that shows how each goal directly connects to one or more, how each value connects to one or more strategic goals. At this time, I'd like to pause and ask members if there's any questions on the strategic planning process.
Thank you, Ronnie. Members, I ask that we focus only on questions or comments related to the process itself. We'll discuss the actual goals and objectives in the draft strategic plan in the next parts of the agenda item. So we have about 5 minutes if you have any questions or concerns or want to talk about the process itself. Do we have any hands? I can't see.
Confirming, we see no hands.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for those non-questions, and I'd like to ask Ronnie to take it up again, and we'll go on to the next agenda item.
Great. Thank you, Chair Payne. I'd like to provide members with an overview of the member deliberation structure during this next part of the agenda. Members should be aware that the goal of today's member deliberation is to surface directions, priorities, and areas of refinement. We don't necessarily want to focus on finalizing a draft of the strategic plan language, so we don't want to wordsmith too much. We will take suggestions around how to phrase and word things in language that's understandable, but also meets the complex or describes the complex work that C2C does, but we don't want to get too into the weeds of, debating whether it should be of or to or for or some of those kinds of things. We'll begin this section by individually reviewing each of the draft 5 goals and the corresponding objectives in the draft strategic plan. Then we'll pause for each member to share their thoughts, reflections, and feedback. After the committee has reviewed all draft goals and objectives, members will have an opportunity to engage in a broader discussion on the draft strategic plan to share high-level thoughts, reflections, and feedback as a whole across the entire plan. So these are the questions that members should consider addressing during the following section when deliberating for Goal 1. These questions were provided in the staff memo, so that's another place that you can refer to it. And I believe we'll be pulling these questions back up during deliberation. But going to the next slide for now. So Goal 1 is to be California's neutral source of trusted information on outcomes in education, jobs, and well-being. There are 5 associated objectives with this goal. The first is earn California's trust in the data we steward by leaning on our value of transparency. Build open science practices into how the data system is built, data reports are run, and research data requests are handled. Number 3, identify priority questions and data sources through learning agendas that draw on input from communities, advisory boards, and partners. Number 4, maintain trust by continuing public governance processes for making decisions about the data system. And finally, number 5, embed privacy, security, and responsible data use to all operations. I'd like to ask Chair Payne to lead the committee in member deliberations for Goal 1.
Okay, let's open it up for conversation about this. I think that let's have it first about the goal itself, and then take a little bit of time on the objectives. Any comments from folks about the directionality of Goal 1?
Debbie has her hand raised.
Debbie?
Hi. Gavin, I hear you. We're doing the goal and then the objectives. I will preview my comment by saying I think the objectives are good. And I want to preview that because I think the issue I want to raise on the goal, I don't actually think touches on the objectives, and it's really about the. I think you could take this in a couple different directions. The thing that stood out to me was around the singular nature of be California's neutral source of trusted information on a set of things. It was actually very helpful. I marked this down in my earlier review. It was very helpful to just review the mission because I see that's sort of true in the mission as well. And I think when I think, and obviously we all know C2C is incredibly unique as it pertains to the data availability and integration within the state of California. The way I read this sort of seemed to imply that other sources of information on these things were perhaps not considered neutral.
I absolutely hear you, and I hear what you're saying. I think that's exactly right. And it didn't occur to me until you just mentioned it that this could be an exclusionary statement as opposed to an inclusionary statement, and we tend to want to be inclusionary in the work. And I think you're absolutely right. So what we need to do in the drafting process going forward is to try to figure out a way to say this in a way that isn't that doesn't claim that we're the only source. I hear you.
I think that's right.
Do other members agree on that topic as well?
Meredith is nodding her head.
So there's nodding of heads. Good. Thank you.
Brandon is giving a thumbs up.
Thank you. Point well taken. Other comments
Brandon.
on the goal itself? Brandon?
Yes. One of the things I was thinking about when we start off the goal with be California's neutral source, it seems passive to me that Cradle-to-Career is just going to be this source of information, but we're not going to be talking about trying to provide outreach, bring people in to understand what data we have, what tools, what research requests we can help with. So I feel so much of our discussion, and I think this goes through some of our other goals as well, but is about trying to communicate outwards about what Cradle-to-Career can provide Californians, both students, parents, teachers, researchers, and just passively being something. And I don't have a word with me right now, and maybe we can all think about it, or maybe we can bring it to the board, something that is more active of what we are already doing, that can help us now track that action through our strategic plan.
I hear you. I hear you, and I'm interested in what other folks think about that. How the term source lands with them. I know we're not supposed to be wordsmithing, but I just want to get a sense of the action versus the passive voice that Brandon's bringing up.
Meredith's hand is raised.
Meredith?
Liberty.
And Liberty after that.
Great. Definitely echo Debbie and Brandon's comments. Potentially serving as a neutral statewide source might address both of those. I wanted to bring up sort of the end of the sentence, the phrase well-being, and potentially offer that a more active way to include our excellent partnerships that are beyond just education or just jobs might be to phrase a how. So potentially serve as a neutral statewide source of trusted information on how education and jobs shape opportunities. You could say shape opportunities for individuals and communities to tie it back to our mission. But I think that for me would provide a bit more concreteness than well-being just seems very broad. And so pointing to education and jobs, connecting to specific opportunities for Californians might align with the 5 or so objectives underneath more concretely.
Oh, it's very interesting. Very interesting. So it's interesting you mentioned the well-being piece too, because the piece that I've been struggling with is it's pretty easy for people to get when you say education, whether it's K-12 or higher ed or all of it to combine, plus the jobs information. The one that got me caught up was well-being, because it's so much more than mean, is it health data? Is it social services data? We all know that we want to put more into this and have more through this process and this organization than sort of just social services data. And how do you say that kind of thing? Is anybody else feeling a little bit weird about the sort of the well-being side of the equation? Perhaps it's cured by changing the orientation of the goal itself, as Meredith suggests, into a how orientation. But I wanted to check in with folks too about both of those things. The first is that do we want to sort of swap the outcomes sort of piece to the how we assist kind of piece, and then the notion of this whole notion of well-being and how we can speak to that. And again, I love wordsmithing, and I'm trying to avoid it, but I think true too, we need some other ways to describe. And I think Brandon sort of mentioned that too in terms of the source equation too. Just opening it up. We had Liberty next. Thank you.
I wanted to concur with my colleagues. I think that I might go back to the B part. And I think one of the challenges that I see with that sort of passive structure is how do we measure this? How do we measure being? And I think that so the idea about well-being is also kind of can fall into that bucket. How do we measure well-being? With what data would we measure well-being? And how do we even define it? And so I guess all of that for me goes back to, as a strategic plan, how will we know if this is working? And how are we holding ourselves accountable back to our sort of guiding principles within it? How do we hold ourselves accountable to this goal? And how do we measure whether or not we are meeting our aspirations here?
Yeah, that's a great point. At least in my experience, the sort of the measurement piece comes along after sort of the outcomes, the objectives and tasks piece, because we're trying to get to ourselves to a place where we are setting out those measurable objectives and doing it with a forethought about how we're going to measure those. I think that's exactly right. We have to impute, and I think we have to trust that the objectives that we've selected and set ourselves on do roll up properly to the goal itself. And so I think that's a key part of the conversation. I'm trying to sort of organize my thoughts here and wondering how we move on. I think without sort of taking apart and putting the goal back, let us spend some time on the objectives themselves and see if some of that informs the goal language itself. And then I think too, let's sort of trust Ronnie and the team to take the commentary around the goal itself and combine that with our comments around the objectives and see if see what the result can be in a sort of a future draft for our deliberations. Does that seem okay with folks?
Debbie has her hand raised.
Debbie.
Sorry, just trying to navigate to the unmute. So that perfectly goes. I had two comments, and which I think are helping to hopefully try to move us along to the objectives. On the B part though, and appreciate the caution against wordsmithing. I actually am looking at that first objective that is here, and I do feel like, again, not going to try to wordsmith. I really like the word earn. And as we're thinking about what else could swap in for B in a revised version of this, I keep coming back to that objective, because that first objective is sort of the meat of what we're trying to do. And it is also sometimes it's a little less specific in some ways as an objective than the other one. So just would encourage the future wordsmithers maybe to look at those two in tandem. And then I think on your point, Gavin, just about the objectives, I think you raised a question, I think, which is an important one for us to just be explicit about at the start of this conversation, is measurability.
Yeah.
And I think we're all kind of, there's, discussion in the document about we want goals that are measurable. I had some notes on my own for some later objectives that like, how would we measure that? So I do think it's really important for us to sort of decide at the outset how critical it is that these be measurable. Not that we're going to decide how they be measured now, but there might be some that we're not, that would just get nixed if we decided measurability is a must-have.
I think that's a marvelous approach, and I think why should we not have that lens as we're looking through all of these objectives and the subsequent ones as well? Does that seem right?
You have nothing else.
Good, nothing else. All right, then let's open for discussion the notion of all the objectives. I don't necessarily think that we need to sort of march through them all together. Let's take any comments or sort of measurability questions or ideas to the objectives on a whole. I'm going to trust folks to be able to take notes on what we're saying and to be able to sort of scan back and forth between them. But I don't know that we need to march through all of them one by one. So let's just open up the objectives themselves and then ask for sort of comment, and especially as to Debbie's point and to Liberty's point, what's the measurability here, and how we're going to at least some initial thoughts about how we're going to measure against them. The floor is open.
Brendan has his hand raised.
Brendan.
So just in reading through these, going back to the beginning of the point of the strategic plan being accessible to all Californians in reading and trying to understand us, the terms open science and learning agendas being actual key terms, I feel like beg the need for a definition, and some might not be the key or the terms that we should be using in the strategic plan. If we could maybe explore what those terms mean to the average person. Once you've had a wonderful meeting with our executive director and she talks about learning agendas and open science and really explains it all to us. But I think in this format, we might need to explore changing those.
Yeah, right. So we've all been brought along on this path for several meetings, and I think that you're right. It's sort of not a universally accepted term or the meaning of the term itself, right? So point was taken. Meredith.
I was going to say the exact same thing, and to build on that, woven throughout some of these objectives is what I understand to be a very brilliant and intentional opportunity for Cradle-to-Career participants, really the broad public, to engage, whether it's through community conversations that are dedicated to input on the strategic plan, or just a regular cadence of public comment opportunities consistently. And the more I reflect on that, the more appreciative and excited I am. So if this goal and the objectives is the natural place to highlight those on-ramps, I think it would be really compelling to try to underscore that isn't really sort of a given for a strategic planning process. We have an opportunity where some people, whether it's through a community conversation or other mechanisms, may actually be contributing for the first time in their lives to a strategic plan, certainly one that might impact 40 million Californians. And so that's pretty special. And I'd love to see, whether it's in how this is communicated more broadly or whatnot, some call out of that. It's implicit in drawing input from communities, et cetera, but the how mechanism, I think, really builds on some of the staff's great work in starting community conversations very early on.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we speak to it in the document itself, but I do think that we speak to it in the plan around dissemination and in acknowledging how much participation and how much added value people brought to this process who don't normally get an opportunity to do so, if I hear you correctly. I think that's exactly right. Marvelous. Other comments on the objectives?
Brendan Bearkey.
Brendan.
So
When I say I want to make sure I'm not calling you Brendan, I'm calling you Brandon, but sometimes we have a family member who's a Brendan. Sometimes I mix them, so please forgive at the outset.
no problem. I will answer to either. On this first objective, I think I've read it a couple of different ways, so I'd be curious what the other committee members are thinking here. When we say earn Californians' trust in the data we steward, are we asking, and is our objective to earn Californians' trust in the data that we are getting from our data providers? Something that we as C2C really don't have a say in and don't collect it and don't necessarily edit it in any way. Or are we asking, is the objective to earn Californians' trust in our stewardship, how we handle and host that data, and then provide it to others? So if it's the latter, I think we might need to change how we are phrasing it to talk about our stewardship rather than trust in the data.
I like that point. I like that point. I think it's well taken. Thank you. It brings up something too that I've been thinking about throughout this process, and I'll preview it now, but I want to talk about it specifically later on. The thing, especially in today's world, and I'm assuming going forward, this whole notion of privacy and security of the information is going to be absolutely key. We don't certainly have a goal of privacy and security, but it's probably one of those things that we need to speak about literally throughout what we're doing, and would love people's input about that side of the equation. The trusted is only part of the equation, but in earning that, we need to constantly talk about, at least from my standpoint, the ways that we keep that information secure and private. And I think that's sort of one of our fundamentals. All right, going forward, other hands?
Marianne Bates has her hand raised.
Marianne, please.
Thank you. This is incredibly helpful. We're all taking furious notes here. Just a couple of reflections and one question for you. So the data stewardship piece, that's really helpful to hear how you read that. Going back to how we think about the objectives and the overall goal, one reflection is, be California's neutral source of information felt too singular. I wonder if just shifting that to be a neutral source of trusted information for California, if that changes the vibe a bit. So we can think about that. The other piece that I would like your input on as I've been staring at these words goes back to the question around well-being. And as we were grappling with the words, as Gavin was highlighting, education, jobs, those are short words. The take-up of social services like Medi-Cal and CalFresh is many words. And so well-being was in some ways considered to be kind of a stand-in for things like that. But there's also something for you as a board to think about around health specifically. So if you look back to the mission, it's drawn straight from what's in statute 2, right? It's research on education, economic, and health outcomes for individuals, families. No, we have no actual health data in the data system. Bringing health data into the data system would be a very future state thing we are not ready for today, and we'd need to be very thoughtful about that. And it was definitely contemplated in the original vision for Cradle-to-Career. So I just wanted to share that bit of context that we're kind of wrestling with. Should the word health show up? There's always a possibility for the governing board to use the annual work plan process to say this year, explore the feasibility of health or more health adjacent outcomes. But I just wanted to give that context as you think about the words specifically around education, jobs, and well-being. The piece that Member Lee mentioned around just flipping it and seeing how education and jobs shape opportunities and well-being in California, or how education and jobs shape opportunities in California, might sidestep that a bit. But this is a very long-winded way of saying this is a moment for the board to sit with. Is Cradle-to-Career's primary identity the education and jobs data system? Or is it broader than that? Because we all know that is the core, and we have a lot of data points that don't fall into it. So that's my long-winded reflection and question.
Yeah, I think, well, for those of us who were part of the planning process from the get-go, I think the answer's yes, and I think it was always meant to be much larger than that. And so, and that's, I think I share I share the sort of the ill situation of the term well-being too. And I think we need to think about how looking forward, we want it to be something much more than just education jobs, and we wanted to have all those other domains as sort of originally conceived of, and then how we can sort of move ourselves in that direction with these goals and objectives. So thank you for that, Mary. Other comments, hands? A reminder, we're on the objectives section of goal number 1. Debbie.
Well, I am going to go back because I want to respond to one of Marianne's questions. She pulled out the B, California's neutral source, and asked if it was just an A, if that would sort of address the question. I think from where I sit, I think that is one option for sure of how to do it, just to kind of make it so it's not the only neutral source. My hesitance in that, and I really don't have a proposal that I'm would be itching for, but I think my one hesitation on that is there is something truly that's singular about C2C as it was built and as it's intended and as the board wants to be supportive in creating. So I think another way would be to keep it sort of a singular neutral source, but add in more words that relate to the uniqueness of it, the integrated nature. Or I'm not sure, again, I don't want to spend too much time wordsmithing, but I think it's one way or the other. So because when we're thinking about things like outcomes on education, lots of information on that from different segments or what have you. So I think we can either make it singular, or we can use additional words to describe the uniqueness of C2C. That would be my response to that question.
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion. I'd love to circle back in terms of people's intentionality around their understanding and their desire around whether the system is more than just jobs and education, right? So I was pretty clear about my assumptions in the equation and my aspirations in the equation, but I'd love to hear from other folks about that. And you know how I am about silence being assent. All right, great. Moving on. Let's. We have some. Oh,
You do have one.
Oh, we have Anne.
I just took the bait. No, I agree with you, Chair. That I do think it's larger, and we do want to include more things and get the whole picture. That's the whole point of Cradle-to-Career, is to get a bigger picture, to get a better resolution of what is going on for all of these different populations in California. But I do think we should potentially be hesitant in the strategic plan when we're putting it into a goal. If we're not going to be able to measure it within the strategic plan horizon, that we might be setting ourselves up, even if we think in the 10-15-year plan we're going to grow. I think we as a group and as a board have to think about what's in the next 2 to 4 years when we're putting language in here.
I think that's thank you for your affirmation and your caution. And I love how you phrase view and resolution as parts of a whole. Thank you for that. All right, so that's good. I think I think that sort of Ronnie and company have a lot to work with on goal number 1 and a lot to deal with. Let's move ourselves on to goal number 2. Ronnie, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Payne. I also want to preview for the committee that one of our processes is to take all of this feedback today and very quickly summarize it and turn it around to staff for their conversations and thinking about any revisions to make to the goals and objectives going into the February 25th governing board meeting, where we will continue to gather feedback from the entire governing board. Members may consider and address the questions that were on the previous slide. It's fine, stay on the slide, but address the questions on the previous slide. But I feel like the conversation around the last goal worked out well for everybody to be able to share their comments. Goal 2 is to create data insights and tools that Californians count on. The objectives under the goal, number 1, use user-centered design to discover and create meaningful data products for the public. 2, develop and release intuitive public dashboards and data reports that tell human stories about Californians. 3, create and provide curated data sets for the public to answer questions and quantify impact. And number 4, enable external research through a C2C secure data enclave, where researchers can do analysis in a controlled environment that protects data privacy and security. And I'll turn it back over to Chair Payne.
Great. Thank you, Ronnie. Members, we have about 10 minutes for this one. Let's sort of organize it the same way that we did the previous one. Let's tackle comments, suggestions, reflections on the goal first, and then we'll go into the objectives as a body. So the goal is create data insights and tools that Californians count on. Comments? Liberty, you're up.
Thank you. I think maybe this will be a common theme of mine, but how do we know Californians count on a tool? And how do we know what a data insight is? So I kind of am going back to the measurement piece, but if we want this goal, how do we know if we're reaching it? That's the general question, I would say, and I don't quite see it through the objectives. I know we're not quite there yet, but I think I need maybe some clarity on what this goal means when it says creating a data insight. So what is a data insight? And how do we know that Californians count on the tools themselves?
Thank you. Thank you for that. And what I heard too was that you do not see the linkage between the objectives and the measurement piece that would lead you to believe that the goal is being met.
Brandon, thank you.
Brandon?
Yeah, so I think I'm focused on the phrase count on. It makes the goals seem that we are trying to get Californians to rely on Cradle-to-Career, to make Cradle-to-Career somehow indispensable. And while we all love Cradle-to-Career, I don't know if that's the role we're necessarily trying to place ourselves in. I think we're trying to be meaningful, valuable to Californians, but not necessarily trying to place ourselves in a position where Californians cannot exist without us or cannot find their objective without using us. So I think we use meaningful later in objectives, and I don't want our goal or how we value or measure our achievement of this goal is that without us, some section of California will fail to achieve their goal, maybe.
Hear you. I'd love for us to be indispensable, but I hear exactly what you're saying in that piece. All right, other comments on the goal itself?
You have Debbie Cochran and Mary.
Debbie, and then
Marianne.
Marianne.
Yeah, I would, it's funny because I've thought I'd count on, and I looked at those when I would, from the measurability perspective, I was like, well, yeah, I could see how we would measure those. But I understand that's a different way of thinking of the words count on. But it's interesting. I had a totally different read of that. I did have the on a sort of similar theme though, in terms of creating data insights, and whether a word like facilitate would be more suitable. I think especially with the researcher type of audience. It is really about facilitating data access for researchers who would then go create the data insights. So again, not in the wordsmithing variety. I also would just say though, in the preamble, we're not really talking about the preambles, but I liked the preambles, and I had circled and underlined this one phrase in the second paragraph of the preamble. Because the second paragraph goes into, for the general public, this is what we want; for practitioners, this is what we want; researchers, this is what we want in this kind of best use. and what I circled was readily available and easier to work with. Because I actually felt like that felt very tangible, and it actually felt like the description for all of them, it sort of listed as the best use for practitioners, but actually that's the best use for everybody, for the general public, for practitioners, for researchers. I mean, they all have different ways in which they would want to use it and different contexts and what availability means. But anyway, I just really like that phrase. I felt like it was very accessible. So as we're talking about the goal and whether the goal is sufficiently precise or means exactly what we intend, I wanted to throw out that beautiful phrase, readily available and easier to work with.
Okay, thank you. I like that. Marianne.
Really helpful comments. The count-on phrase is something we wrestled with a bit, and part of what it was aiming to capture is a shorter way of saying people actually use it and they find it useful. So I think this is actually one of the things that is more measurable than a lot, because we can look not only at views and downloads of data and data tools, we can also track citations and references of studies that use the data or of the data we put out. So like this one is, I think, more measurable, but the word count on was kind of a like, they use it, they find it useful, and they trust the information enough to have it inform decision making. So it's trying to combine all of those vibes into just a very short phrase that's easy to understand. So that's how we were thinking about those words. It's incredibly helpful to hear such a landing with you when you weren't part of that conversation.
I really appreciate that. Though, well, actually, what you described is how it landed with me at first as well, and that's why I appreciate Brandon's comments. But something we need to sort of think through too. Perfect. Other comments on the goal itself? Meredith, please.
I think it's fitting that you're essentially doing this live user-centered design, because the count on phrase for me also generated a lot of confusion, and usable and useful is a lot more clear, I think, to the general public.
Interesting.
I would double down on what Brandon mentioned about, it's great if an entity or a set of tools is reliable, but generating value seems like it might lend itself well here, whether it's in the goal or emphasized in the objectives. So I'd encourage us not to lose sight of that, that we are, as an organization, trying to generate valuable, and that can mean useful, usable tools and facilitate insights.
Great.
If it's okay, I might dig into one of the objectives here. I love the word.
I think it's time for objectives. Go for it.
Okay, I love the word discover, but when I read that the first time, I conjured up these images of, the staff going out and like exploring private sector products or evaluating them, which is really not something that I think is the intention. And so leaving the wordsmithing till later, I might flag that as something to reflect on, and underscoring how we develop and facilitate might be more aligned.
Thank you. Other comments on the objectives as we go? Brandon.
So one of the words that caught me, and I was unsure where it was coming from, and maybe we can change it, is the word human in the second objective, telling human stories about Californians. I feel like if we're telling stories about Californians, Californians are human. So are we trying to identify a different aspect of a story? Are we trying to not talk about a personalized story that is individual with PII, something that I think is a sensitivity that we should maybe think about in what we're trying to develop and release? Is it supposed to be more generic stories about Californians that are not individualized? So I would be very curious to hear more of how others read human stories, and maybe what was the motivation behind that phrase.
Good. Perfect. I think we'll have to unpack that a little bit. Let me just press a little bit on the objective itself. The objective itself is about dashboards and data reports, and you have no issues with it being an objective per se, and it's valuable. And I just wanted to reaffirm that the objective itself is valuable and affirmed. It's just that how we talk about what the stories we tell is the issue.
Correct. I think it's a very important one for the
Okay.
overall goal of data insights and tools is those dashboards and data reports.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Other comments, other hands? So Liberty, to your point, as I'm scanning these objectives, I think I'm seeing measurability pretty easily. I wanted to sort of check in with you to see if they sort of hit you the same way.
I think what Marianne was mentioning was something I had not thought of, as far as like how many times is this being referenced in research studies. That could be measurable, but I am still struggling with how to measure whether something is meaningful to the public, and without that being defined, I don't see it in here. And I could possibly come up with some ideas, but without them being in the strategic plan, I think that sort of, we're missing that final step, which is whether we know if our strategies are working. And so it's because the measurement of these objectives is not included in the strategic plan, I don't have anything to go off of. So it's not super clear to me, no.
Okay, that's fair, and I may put you on the hook for helping us find measurable ways of what meaningful means. Okay, good. You've just volunteered. I hope you don't mind. All right, thank you. Other comments? On goal 2. All right. Perfect. Let us now, if we could please, move on to goal number 3. Ronnie.
Yes, thank you so much. Goal number 3 reads, provide equitable access to information and tools for all Californians. Objective 1 is tell a clear story about why data insights matter. Number 2, maximize reach, strengthen understanding, and expand community use of tools. And number 4, develop and implement data literacy efforts that address the diverse needs of individuals across California. Member Payne, or Chair Payne.
All right. Same deal. We have about 10 minutes to discuss this. If we take up the full 10 minutes, let's start with the goal number 3, provide equitable access to information and tools for all Californians. Take it away, hands. Seeing none. Oh,
Debbie Cochran.
hi, Debbie. You're up.
Hi, I would, if possible, I would love to hear from I love the words in the goal. I would love to hear from the team how they have thought about measuring equitable access.
I'm happy to start to speak to that, though more detailed information from Shannon, I think would be wonderful for the board at another time. So I think as we were wrestling with kind of translating your high level guidance into some starting point language here, goal 3 is essentially trying to get at what Designee Bjerke mentioned at the beginning around ensuring that the things that we create actually get used by people and reach communities. So that's what the heart of this goal is. And there's a lot of wrestling we could do around the order of the goals and all of that. For equitable access, I think the way that Shannon has talked about this in the past in her presentations to you and how the comms team and engagement team are thinking about this is that it's both overall metrics. So for example, how many views has the dashboard gotten? How many times have the aggregated flat files been downloaded? But then also define specific ways in which you can think of different parts of the state, either geographically or communities that have historically been excluded, or communities that are specific, really, if you think about like making sure we reach people working in workforce, not just education and higher education, defining those in advance and then having metrics that let us see, did we see that people across the state or people from different communities are engaging with the work, using the tools, engaging with us in events and things like that. So it's sort of an exercise of both looking at the overall metrics and then creating some structure around the metrics within that to try to understand if all the downloads happen only in Sacramento, for example, we would not consider that a success.
Got it. Debbie, I'm calling on you for a follow-up. Any question or comment?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Other comment?
Brendan Beerke.
Brendan.
One of the things when I read provide equitable access, I didn't really see then clearly in the objectives, was this idea of different modalities of how Californians might want to engage with us. Be it, I mean, I think very traditionally online on a desktop is going to be where a lot of people do it, but do we have a goal, or a part of our goal is there going to be an objective of doing mobile applications or mobile ways for people to access? Or are we even going to have an objective to understand whether or not people want paper products from us? Are we needing to put out paper reports to reach a certain community so everyone does have access? I think I could maybe read that into maximize reach or maybe data literacy efforts. But I'm just not sure. So maybe we could think about adding another objective to understand what equitable access means modality wise for Californians, and make sure that we are looking towards that and maybe measuring that we're not reaching the community because we're not doing mobile applications, or we haven't done a lot of user-centered design on a mobile application versus our desktop.
That just reflecting on that really quickly, that's really helpful. Thinking about desktop versus mobile, paper versus online. I think a lot of the work the engagement team has also done around language relates to this as well. So understanding language, and then even I would argue thinking about the disaggregation functions. So can you see something by your local school district or by some other mechanism? Like it's essentially, I think what I'm hearing you ask for is, are we being intentional about providing the information in the way that people want to access it? And looking at it from that lens, in addition to like what's actually feasible and possible for us to do. And then the data literacy piece is also, like this is mentioned very specifically in our statute too, that the hope for the data system is that we don't just put things out, but that we help people learn how to use the data as well.
And maybe we state it just in that way. Brandon, your reaction?
No, that is all very helpful. And I think we're going along the right lines. Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments?
Meredith.
Meredith.
The values section of goal 3 has some framing around Cradle to Career being built by the people of California for the people of California. And I think right now the objectives and the words in the goal don't necessarily underscore the opportunity for co-design and co-creation in a way that does justice to, for example, Exhibit A, community conversations, and all of the different feedback sessions. So I would love to see some more explicit weaving of that engagement. Maybe the Community Engagement Advisory Board would have some suggestions here into the specific objectives. So it is much more of a co-creation vibe, if you will.
I hear you. The scribble. Thank you. Other comments on the objectives?
Just, I'm going to keep doing reflections to try to make sure I'm understanding, and we can translate your thoughts into a revised draft here. The co-design piece, I think there may also be an opportunity. There's an objective under goal 2 that's essentially trying to talk about co-design, right? That first one on user-centered design. So we can think about how to bridge that across both goal 2 and goal 3, because they're both relevant there. I think another reflection, more broadly, I think we're going to wrestle with this, like, how do we measure? How do we know? 2 thoughts. I think I'm imagining the objectives as part of how you know whether you reached the goal. So in my mind, at least, a lot of the objectives are a little bit easier to imagine measuring than maybe the broad goal itself. So maybe that's one way to think about it. I think the other piece that may be worth lifting up in the preamble or somewhere is the importance of how this 5-year strategic plan, which is a lot of years, right? By definition, will be very high level. How the strategic plan interfaces with the annual work plans that you all approve. Because the annual work plans will, by definition, be a lot more specific. Like, did we release that dashboard before the end of the fiscal year? Yes or no? Check. Measurable, observable. And so I wonder if there's a way, I'm looking at Ronnie, maybe we can think about, in the framing of all of this, just lifting up the importance of the annual work plan as well as being the part that is like most specific and concrete, while also making sure, like, at the end of 5 years, we should be able to look at this document and I say, like, either we met that or we didn't. It shouldn't be so vague that we can't know we achieved success, but somehow lifting up the process of the annual work plan might help resolve some of these puzzles too.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Executive Director Bates. I think that in one of my initial presentations, we talked about the fact that the goal is not going to really be a traditional SMART goal like you might see in sort of some other work, that each of the objectives will roll up to help us understand if we achieve that goal. And the action planning does exactly what you stated. The action plan really breaks each of the objectives down into yearly, monthly, incremental tasks that the staff are engaged in that are measurable and objective that will then continue to roll up into these larger goals. So I just wanted to reinforce your summary of that.
Perfect. Thank you. Ready?
Meredith, please.
Meredith.
Yeah, just to respond, appreciate the call out of the user-centered design for goal 2. I think because goal 3 though has provide equitable access to and a lot of other objectives that should be fairly straightforward to measure, I think more explicitly integrating some of the values statement and the great work that the staff has done would be well received. Like, when I think about equitable access, I'm always questioning who's at the table. Why is the table over here versus over there? And Cradle-to-Career has done a really great job of trying to be thoughtful and intentional about that. I would hate for the, I would be disappointed if in these bullets, it somehow seems more of this passive, like, we are providing you access, here is the door, because of all of the great work that has been done so far around co-design and engagement and co-creation. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
I also think too, as we get into the conversation of goal 4, it'll help, that your exact comment will help inform that conversation too. Other comments around goal 3 before we do move on to goal 4? Toby.
Just a very quick comment that I absolutely love the data literacy one, and I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, +1 on me on that one too. I think that's a key activity, and I would even say, with no disrespect meant to anybody else, that it's data literacy inside and intra the members of our organization as well, because sometimes data is spoken of differently in different ways by different of our members. And I think that literacy process is a self process as well. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to goal number 4. Again, we have about 10 minutes to walk through this one and take it away running.
Great, thank you so much. So goal 4 reads, build a flexible data system that rapidly adapts to the needs of Californians. And the objectives under this goal, number 1, build the data system for scale and flexibility so it answers questions today and in the future. 2, adapt to changes in law, standards, and industry guidance so that the system stays compliant. And 3, routinely review and update security and privacy practices so that the system is safe and secure. Chair Payne.
Okay, perfect. Let's take it as we've taken it before. Comments on the goal itself first. Marvelous. Let's move on to objectives. I'm going to say in objective number 3, we need to put in some language. I'm just channeling Meredith here that is about the co-creation in our practices. Well, actually, it's objective number 2 to changes in sort of desired outcomes and information desired by those populations who have been part of the process from the get-go. But I'm just going to throw that out there. Someone else can speak to that more cogently than me, I am sure. Comments on the 3 objectives on goal number 4? Brendan.
Yeah, I think I'm echoing a little bit of what you just said, Chair Payne, but I think the objectives don't necessarily identify a way for us to measure what the needs of Californians are. I think it's really talking in these objectives about the flexibility of the data system, how the data system is built and reacts. And coming from the legislature, I definitely do think that changes in law are the needs of Californians. But we have other things that I think are on the horizon that we will want the data system to be able to adapt to the needs of Californians in the face of AI. What does education and the labor market look like in the future, and what are those things happening? I don't see an objective here that really helps us collect that and understand that and then react to it as a data system.
Beautifully.
Meredith?
Gavin, you were accurately predicting that I would have a comment about security and privacy as well. I think to your earlier question a while back on whether the mentions of security and privacy woven throughout the different goals and objectives resonates, or, you know, would there be an opportunity for like a separate goal that really was about that explicitly? I actually really appreciate seeing it consistently throughout different goals and objectives. We are the only state that has we were the first state to have a dedicated standalone data privacy regulator, the CPPA, California Privacy Protection Agency. And so I could see maybe in addition to this strategic document, some sort of a half-page, one-page co-designed potentially with CPPA use case study or something like that. But for this purpose, I actually really appreciate that it's not this, goal number 6 or whatnot, but actually woven throughout the different sections.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was my tendency as well. I just sort of like equity is one of our core functions. Privacy and security is a core function as well. Other comments?
Debbie Cobb. Debbie Cobb.
Debbie, thank you.
So I actually just noticed, I think in the memo, the committee report, there are 2 kind of the goal is written twice. And in one case, it talks about a flexible data system that continually adapts to the needs of Californians. And on the slide, it says rapidly.
Yeah,
So
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Debbie, I'm gonna jump in. This is Ronnie. That is my mistake, and it should be
Okay.
continually. So I apologize.
Okay.
We were doing revisions and I obviously missed that. So I will take that as my mistake, but it should be continually. That was the word that the team settled on.
Great. I think that's a much better word than rapidly. So thrilled to hear that. I don't know that this system will ever get a system that's built up of, aggregated data from other data providers that are the needs of the future. We probably don't know what they are right now. We're not collecting data. I don't know that we can ever really describe anything as rapid. I guess rapid is sort of in the eye of the beholder, but I think continually is a great word. The other thing I would just say, just to jump ahead to make my one comment about the objectives, I compared to some of the other ones we're looking at, these seem a little harder to measure, but I actually think that that's okay. I think these are really appropriate objectives. They're more about work planning, it seems to me. You need to build in time and an effort to routinely update and review and update security and privacy for any of these ones, review the laws. Taking the time to do that is the priority. I don't know that we would want to measure how many of those things happened. It doesn't matter. We need to do it when it needs to be done. So just want to throw that out because since we talked about measurability as a goal.
Thank you for those comments. I really appreciate that. I think that's right. I also think to Marianne's comment earlier and Ronnie's comments around the annual work plan and sort of and making sure that those are sort of connected to and rock solid and measurable is the sort of our routine source of sort of self-measurement, even if it's a little bit more nebulous as these schools represent. Marianne.
Just a few reflections and curiosities. So this goal was one that we wrestled with a lot because what we're trying to communicate is that the underlying infrastructure of the data system should be built in such a way that we can be nimble and responsive over time, right? Flexible, and with a real eye towards scale, right? So we're trying to build the secure data enclave, not to be bespoke to let like one researcher in per year, but to really be able to operate at scale. Thinking about flat files for the public so that researchers can work with that data at scale. So it has to do with both this kind of the underlying infrastructure and architecture that needs to be continually built and rebuilt to stay at the cutting edge of making this responsive and nimble and scalable. So that's part of the big picture. So I sort of think of like a lot of goal 2 is around the user-centered design work that Ryan's team does, and a lot of goal 4 is about the underlying infrastructure that Dan's team does, just to oversimplify. A lot of it is interconnected, but just to oversimplify. One curiosity for Designee Bjerke, you zoomed in on the word the needs, and you're like, what are those needs? Some of those needs have to do with, one way to interpret needs is like literally the infrastructure of the data system, the privacy, security, and all of that. The other piece I heard you talk about is like, what's the labor market impact of artificial intelligence, for instance? Something that 5 years ago, our questions around that would look really different from today. And I imagine 5 years from now will look different again. In my mind, I go back to the learning agenda process as being key for that. And I wonder if there's a way for us to think about either here under goal 4 or we have that under goal 1, really uplifting that we will have a nimble process that lets us pivot and respond to what is the highest priority based on the context in a nimble way. So like the workforce data expansion, fantastic example of us being really nimble and responsive to a really salient policy issue right now. So that's just a curiosity. Is that what you were getting at when you were mentioning the needs? Is it like learning agendas and priorities that are bubbling up that way, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, no, I think you got it directly, and I think when I was reading it, the rapid, or I guess we're using the word continually, adapts to the needs of Californians. It just I think was a bit broader in my mind. So maybe a different word than needs, or we add another word, the functional needs of Californians to talk about what the Californians need from the data system is the functionality, the scalability. And if we're going to talk about kind of the core architecture here, and we're going to talk about the questions and the learning agendas and objective one or goal one.
Thank you. Liberty?
I like that, Brandon, and I also wanted to go back to what Meredith was saying about kind of the different approaches to addressing and calling out privacy, security, and safety with the system. While I love to see it woven throughout, I think that is actually really important because it needs to be, in my mind, it needs to be front and center in everything that we do. If we aren't doing that, we shouldn't be doing what we're doing with the system, meaning privacy and security. I wonder if there's a way, so not getting into wordsmithing, but I do wonder if there's a way to pull that up into the goal itself. So not only weaving it throughout, but this goal is about a secure and flexible data system that does blah, 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 blah. I think it might help to put it into the goal. So I know it's wordsmithing, but I'll just say that there.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments on the objectives for goal 4? Perfect. Thank you. All right. Let us now move on to goal 5. Obviously, when you see this, it's about the goal 5 is we've done a lot of conversation about sort of the external face. Goal 5 is clearly internal and the team itself, and so I just wanted to sort of locate that for folks, and then let's call it up, please, Ronnie.
Great. Thank you, Chair Payne. I was going to mention exactly the same thing, that these are slightly more internal facing, but as a team, the C2C staff felt strongly that representing all of the work that supports all of the other goals is also really important. So this goal reads, optimize organizational and operational culture. And there are 6 goals or 6 objectives under this goal. Recruit and retain top talent on the C2C team. Operationalize C2C's shared values. Use current and accurate fiscal and administrative data to inform resource prioritization and decision-making. Make meaningful partnerships inside and outside of state government. Define outcomes and measure what matters. Finally, manage risk within a complex compliance landscape.
All right, let's start off as we have been. We have about 10 minutes for this, but we can go as long as we want. But let's reflect ourselves on the wording around the goal itself. Comments? Ronnie just put her hand up physically. I was about to call on her. Any comment on this? Perfect. Let's move on. Objectives. Obviously, these ones are considerably more measurable, as it were. But I'd love to hear what folks' reactions to these objectives are around the operations of the organization itself. Hands? Brendan.
I guess I would start with the last objective, manage risk within a complex compliance landscape. I would want to add manage and minimize risk within a complex compliance landscape. We can manage anything, but if our goal is to minimize it, to minimize risk, we should probably say that there.
Thank you for that marvelous suggestion. Other comments? Wonderful. I think, well, obviously, I think this goal reflects a lot of reflection internally on the team, especially about how they want their organization to run and operate. So I'm going to take from the silence on this one general affirmation of how the team believes it should organize itself, and thank you on that one. Okay. So that's goal 5. That one is complete. That one is complete. So now, what we have to please is now we have to move to the next set of discussions. Now that we've had an opportunity to individually discuss each goal and objectives and their associated objectives, I'd like to begin the next part of our deliberations on the draft strategic plan as a whole. We have about 15 minutes for member deliberations and questions. Members should consider addressing the questions reflected on the slides and outlined in the corresponding staff report. Any comment in general on the draft strategic plan? Taking a look at these questions here. As I'm reflecting on these questions, I'm reflecting on some of your comments to date, and we've touched on almost everything here in some of the comments that you've already made and that I've made, and Mariana's contributed to as well. So, Meredith?
I don't know if we've explicitly elevated the attachment A, but I wanted to give a shout out to the creation of that. There's a column for the value, and then another for how the value shows up in the goals. And I really appreciated that the third column on related goals, you can see several different goals for a given value. And I actually counted, and there isn't one goal that got left out or one value that got left out. There's a nice cross section for each one. So whether that was done afterwards or iteratively as the language was being developed, we'll leave that to the secret sauce of the team, but it was definitely appreciated that you could really crosswalk for all of those different things. So it's a great attachment.
I love that, and I love the fact that you counted too.
I have a
We're
quick
data driven, right?
I have a quick curiosity because when this table emerged, we're like, oh, this will be really useful for the committee to see. As we move towards supporting you in a final document, I'd actually be curious to know whether you think a table like this would be useful in the final public-facing thing, or if it's mainly useful as an internal deliberative thing. It's like, yep, got it. We checked, how these things all relate. Or could you see some version of this being the final version too, so that people can connect the dots?
I think it would be both useful for the public, but also useful for our fellow board members, especially those who have been engaged in this process with you on this committee as well. So I think it would be absolutely useful.
That transparency, I think, is great. And to my, first comment about this could be the first experience for some of our community members actually getting to provide input and to comment on a strategic plan of this magnitude. Having that will appeal to those who like to read tables and so forth, and also just help support a healthy reflection on how core values might really be visible in each of the specific goals and objectives.
I think that's right. Thank you.
If it's okay, I'll just respond that the team felt really strongly that the values actually really drive all of their work. And actually research around organizations tell us that if staff are able to internalize the values, that actually helps to move them up beyond the daily tasks that they do and really become connected to the organization and to the outcomes and committed to the work that they're doing. And so I agree, Member Lee. I think that this table is really important to the staff and making sure that we actually did have different iterations of going back and forth, and as language changed, we were able to refine it. But I think that it just really speaks to the commitment of the team to be able to include something like this.
Marvelous. Brendan.
So I just had a comment. One of the prompts before we took the slide down was about whether or not the strategic plan had ways for collaboration across C2C for all of the staff. And I think it definitely does. But there were some points where there was mention that, oh, goal 2 is more focused on this team and goal 4 is more focused on this team. I think something that we could potentially look at and just in reviewing when we're updating from the notes today is to try to make sure that there's an objective for each team or every staff member within a goal to make sure that the whole entire Cradle-to-Career staff feels that they are responsible for each and every goal. It's not someone else on the team's responsibility to do goal 2, and it's their responsibility to do goal 4. So you don't need to bend over backwards to create new objectives to get everyone in every single one. But if there can be that kind of place for each staff member to see how they contribute to each goal, I think that could be really helpful.
I think that's a marvelous suggestion for our executive director. Thank you. Other comments in general? Great. Thank you for walking through all of that with us. I want to now, if I could please turn it back over to Ronnie to talk through the next part of the process for us.
Great, thank you. Well, today obviously is February 11th, and we're reviewing the strategic plan in order to refine this draft. And so all of your comments, all of the conversation will be reflected back to staff, and they will be working on some revisions. Between February 12th and 17th, they'll consider these comments. They'll actually be revising and continuing to improve the draft in order to have it ready for the February 25th governing board meeting, where we'll provide an update of the second draft of the well, it's more than the second draft, but the official draft of the strategic plan.
Right.
Yeah, the next draft of the strategic plan from the committee, and give feedback on that draft during the February 25th meeting. Then in April, this committee will reconvene on the 29th. We'll continue to review and refine the updated strategic plan and prepare formal recommendations for the board's consideration, which will take place at the May 20th governing board meeting. And so the board at that time will review and take action based on the committee's recommendation for the potential adoption of the strategic plan. So those are really our next steps.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I think what is the next step for us is motion. Do we have? Oh, there it is. It showed up on the screen. So
yeah. So I think that's me, Chair Payne. Sorry about that. I signed off a little too soon. So the following motion is being brought forward for committee consideration, that you will move to approve the proposed strategic planning goals and objectives as specified in the staff report, and if needed, authorize the committee chair, LRI, and the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data System to incorporate any additional amendments proposed by the committee in preparation for presentation to the board at the February 25th, 2026 board meeting. That concludes my presentation, and I'd like to turn it back to Chair Payne for to lead the closing member questions and comments and other details.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ronnie. Let's, if we could please, have the motion slide back up. What the motion does is sort of honor the comments that were made today and essentially give direction to the team and Ronnie and myself to incorporate those suggestions going forward for us to be able to present at the next board meeting. It's hard to structure a motion like this because you want to be concrete and sequential in those sorts of things. But I think with that delegation, if you guys are comfortable with it, we can move forward and promise to honor suggestions suggestions, comments, and ideas that were brought forth today. With that, could I have a motion from somebody from a member of our committee?
I'll make the motion, Gavin.
Thank you, Meredith. Member Lee makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Member Bierke. I'm sorry, I'm going to the formal when we get to motions. With that, we have a motion and a second. Are there any members and questions or comments on the motion itself? Seeing none, at this point, we'll open it up to members of the public for comment on the motion itself. And the members, obviously the slide is showing you Do we have any members in the room adjacent? No members of the public?
Confirming no members of the public in the room.
Perfect. Stephanie, let's move to Zoom. Are there anybody, members of the public, wishing to comment on the Zoom?
For folks wishing to share a public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, seeing no raised hands, that closes public comment.
Great. Marvelous. Well, we have a motion and a second. Stephanie, could you please do a roll call vote?
Chair Payne,
Aye.
Designee Bierke Member Irwin,
Aye.
Member Cochran,
Aye.
Member Lee,
Hi.
Member Van Natten.
Aye.
For the clarity of the record, we have 5 ayes.
Marvelous. I always love a unanimous vote. Appreciate all of your engagement and all of your conversation today, suggestions, thoughts, and otherwise. Looking forward to more of that at both of our board meetings that are coming up and at our second strategic committee strategic planning committee meeting. Thank you, Sarah. Now, if I could please, I'll move on to agenda item 3. This is our general public comment item for every meeting that we have. We do it twice in general board meetings and once at least in every committee meeting. This time I want to open the floor up to members of the public for general public comment, things that aren't on today's agenda. Is there anybody in the room?
Confirming no one is in the room in Sacramento. For members of the public attending via Zoom, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, I see one raise. Oh, no. Okay, seeing no other raised hands, that closes general public comment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our final agenda item of the day, adjournment. So as we conclude today's inaugural Strategic Planning Committee, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you, as I said, to my fellow committee members for their preparation and engagement today. Clearly, you read everything, including the appendices. Your input and feedback is greatly appreciated, and I'm looking forward to working with the office and LRI to incorporate today's feedback prior to our board meeting in a couple of weeks. Thank you, Ronnie Jones, for your leadership and project management in this planning process. Thank you to the office for your partnership and guidance. And finally, thank you all for your participation. Thank you to our advisory board members and members of the public who have engaged in making comments on this plan. As Ronnie Jones shared earlier, our next Strategic Planning Committee meeting will be on Wednesday, April 29th at noon. More information on the details will be forthcoming on the C2C website. Now, with that, I would like to thank you once again and adjourn this meeting at 1:37 p.m. Thank you all.